Chapter 4, Rapallo, 1924. Ezra and Peggy often played tennis when they both ended up in Rapallo's embrace, Peg driven by rain from Venice, as Ezra wrote Malatesta's cantos. She joined his tennis club and played most days. She found Ezra an expert at the game, but a good stroke prompted a creepy craze. He crowed like a rooster, in love with fame. No anti-Semitic rant is noted, though Mussolini was by now in charge. Was there something in how Ezra gloated that foreshadows his crimes, both small and large? He was already in a fascist state. The dice are rolling. He awaits his fate. Chapter 5, near San Samuel Campo, Venice, July 1957. Alan and Peter had been travelling through Spain and France after leaving Tangier, where hash too strong had prompted paranoid fear, and speed started burrows unravelling. They went to Venice for art bedazzling and settled in with Alan Anson near the Grand Canal Ginsberg set up as seer. The trial of Hal prompted a trammelling. Advice to the poet is do not return. The government is seeking a scapegoat. They would judge his presence provocation. They are in the mood to see some books burn. Bushwhacking a bearded Bolshevik poet would be a big media sensation. Anson, multilingual polymath scribe, well established in the Venetian scene as a flamboyant rake and libertine, thought it time to call together the tribe for a soiree so his friends might imbibe the outlaw poet and his outre sheen in the presence of the Venetian queen. Peggy Guggenheim would surely subscribe. The party plan has the desired effect. Ginsberg's spirits rise up as he prepares to add his name to Guggenheim's salon. This would be the revenge of the reject. While the cops waited stateside, instead he dares to move into the upper echelon. The evening comes, cognoscenti gather. Anson's flat is crowded, the people drink. Peggy arrives and gives Ginsberg a wink. He starts out slow with his usual mantra, but the close room soon has him a lather of sweat. The excitement builds to the brink. Alan needs a towel, and too quick to think, Peter throws it across open slather. The towel moves along an arc of its own and lands on Peggy Guggenheim's coiffed head. First there is silence and an awkward pause. Then she emits an unworldly low moan that becomes the scream of the living dead, while wags rush to provide scattered applause. Peggy makes a scene out of proportion, shares her displeasure and storms out the door, for Peter broke the fundamental law: treat a princess with due care and caution. A contrite Ginsberg practiced contortion. He wrote to Peggy admitting his flaw. He'd not been to a great salon before, and he craved the thrill without distortion. He hoped for cocktails on the Grand Canal, the poet surrounded by famous ladies, with surrealists, butlers and gondoliers. But no invite came to Peggy's cabal. Swearing and drugs put him in with the crazies, and their worlds veer off to different spheres. A few postscripts deserving attention. Alan wrote a poem for his journal, where the invite comes to ends infernal, as do Peggy, her fame and pretension. Greg Corso also deserves a mention. Peggy's own libido, now the colonel. She was not looking for love eternal. He hoped her cash would become his pension. Then Greg was attracted to her daughter, which Peggy took as a grievous insult, and he wasn't welcome at the palazzo. Greg could have fought her, but there'd be slaughter, and he looked for a more pleasant result, penning poetry with a Prosecco. Chapter 6, Spoleto Arts Festival, 7th July 1967. Celebrated cultural collector Carlo Menotti was director of the Festival dei Due Mondi, iconoclasts he brought together fondly, from the cutting edge of dance, opera, music and experimental theatre, into a feast of radical ideas, exploring new ways the whole world coheres. Buckminster Fuller did geodesics, built a dome, talked rational mechanics, and played out his own ballet of the mind. There were poets too, of the troublesome kind. Alan sees Ezra in the audience at the Don Giovanni performance. At the first interval, Alan can't help. He goes up and introduces himself. Things are immediately very strange. Conversation is not on, out of range. As Ezra is silent, he will not talk. There's nothing to say to this hairy hulk. In Ezra's eyes, Alan sees crazy fear. Ezra sees mania, but something clear. Here is a troubadour with a mission. One time, he recalls, he had that vision. Now they're two poets looking at each other, each wondering if they've found a brother. Curtain rise, Alan retreats to his seat, to be lifted by Mozart's heady beat, and the tale of need to want your redemption. Could he find the path for Ezra's exemption from the fascist hell he richly deserved, to join the circle for poets reserved, not in heaven or hell, something calmer, in the cosmic nuance of nirvana? Another day, Ezra emboldened goes to break his silence and read 6 cantos. From number 3 to 115, this historic moment excites the scene. From sitting on Dogana's step forward to Walking Dead and the rest cardboard. Ezra re-establishes his own voice, wows the crowd, leaving critics little choice, but steer clear of fascist insanity and glory in the man's humanity. There's no surprise Alan's raunchy reading leads to his arrest and then his pleading, not guilty to the use of certain words. Alan basks and resolves to go forwards, his 3 hours of frank interrogation an opportunity for oration. The festival is staunch, but the top cop gets 5 years of fame, then lets the case drop. Chapter 7, Llanathrony, Wales, 29th of July, 1967. Alan goes from Italy to London for fun at the Liberation Congress, leaving pressing translation work undone to expand planetary consciousness. Greg Bateson's talk on the greenhouse effect leads to a Welsh valley, quiet and placid, and has for Alan an impact direct when a few days later he drops acid. Sees green shimmers, a grassy mandala, and finds the interconnectivity with mauve atoms in the wind's Kabbalah. In all complexity, its brevity, and the cosmic duty of the poet to find the fuse in each ear and grow it. Chapter 8, Rapallo, 23rd of September 1967. Back in Italy, doing translation with Fernando Pavano is a drudge. But then comes a luncheon invitation from Ezra's constant consort, Olga Rudge. From stony silence, Ezra will not budge, except for advice that they wash their hands, and then much later declining to judge the Vichy perspectives in Paul Moran's stories that, with anti-Semitic strands, Ezra translated as open all night. When Alan chants sutras and Om expands, Pavano says he may give Pound a fright, but Rudge says Ezra would not hang around if he was not happy to hear the sound. After lunch, they drive to Portofino and stroll the foreshore along the jetty. Alan with questions Ezra does not know. Then they stop at La Gritta for coffee. Passers-by look at the disparity. Ezra sits in proud silence for an hour, fine hat, walking stick, and suit most natty, giving a gleam or perhaps a glower, while the bearded man who needs a shower puts all his cheek and chutzpah on display and brings up drugs as the meeting goes sour. Did Ezra ever try hash in his day? Ezra's eyes glaze as he shakes his old head, so Alan shuts up. His project looks dead.